And welcome. Good Friday afternoon to you all. So just a little bit about today before we get started. We are recording the meeting as we're having it. So as we're talking, we'll be using the microphone. And whenever it comes time for public comment, we will have you come up to use the microphone as well. So there we go. My name is Carol Lippert, and I am the Associate Superintendent for High Academic Standards here at the department. Also here with us today over here is Dr. Jonathan Moore. He's our Deputy Associate Superintendent for K-12 Academic Standards. And then we have Bree Rivera, who is our Ed Specialist for Science. And we have Sarah Sleesman, who is our Ed Specialist for STEM. So we're going to be kind of doing a round-robin presentation today. I'm going to start things off, and then we'll hand it to Bree, and then Sarah, and then I will end things. And I always get talking, and then I forget to click the slides, so I'll try to be good about that. So the purpose of today's meeting is to review the current draft of the Arizona Science Standards and to identify any questions or comments that you may have related to the standards. Just keep in mind that our review today is from the perspective of a little bit of a standards novice. So we are going to spend a little bit of time just making sure everybody has the information that they need about the science standards so that when you do ultimately submit your public comment, you're able to submit actionable public comment that we can then take back to our working groups as we begin to rework on the draft standards. Around 45 minutes we'll spend on that first part, give you a little 10-minute break in between if you need to go get a drink of water or use the facilities, and then we'll spend the remainder of the time on questions and comments from all of you. So just a couple of norms for today. We want to keep the meeting moving nice and smoothly. We want to make sure that everybody's comments are heard. So we do ask that you be kind, courteous, and respectful. Certainly be an engaged participant, an active listener. If you have to take notes, we gave you a paper to take notes on, so please feel free to use those. And just a reminder to silence your electronic devices since, again, we are recording the meeting today. So something about standards. It's a process. And Mr. Wrights, I feel like you're going to hear all the things I said yesterday, but you're going to hear them again today. So I was listening or looking at Facebook the other day, and there was this quote that came up from Maya Angelou, and I thought, oh my gosh, that quote sort of describes what it is that we're doing as we're working on the standards. And I'm going to read it to you because I just thought, man, to me, it made a good connection. So the quote is, "We delight in the beauty of a butterfly, but rarely admit the changes it has gone through to achieve that beauty." And so that's what this process is about, right? It's a iterative process where we go back and forth, talking a lot, collecting comments, collecting feedback, allowing a lot of different people to have input and insights so that whatever we ultimately produce is something that is a butterfly, right? Something that is beautiful and that we can all feel ownership in. So that's the process that we're going through right now. And that little like orangey arrow kind of tells you where we're at right now, which is the draft is released for public comment and technical review. And then after the public comment and technical review is completed, then we will bring working groups back together again to do their work and then ultimately bring a draft forward to the State Board of Education that hopefully they'll be able to adopt for us. So we have sort of three areas of comments that we typically get as we are engaged in public comment. We get comments that are related directly to the standards, comments that are related more to curriculum, and others that are related more to instruction. So just as a reminder, the standards, the definition that we use in the standards group is that standards are what a student needs to know, understand, and be able to do by the end of each grade. Standards build across grade levels in a progression of increasing understanding and through a range of cognitive demand levels. Standards are adopted at the state level by the State Board of Education. They are the what. So that's what we're trying to achieve when we're writing standards. So as you're looking at the standards and providing any comments, kind of maybe keep that definition in your mind because part of what we want to know is, did we achieve that? Have we reached that goal of what standards should be? The other piece, of course, is curriculum and instruction. So curriculum, the resources used for teaching and learning the standards. Curriculum are adopted at the local level by districts and schools, and then instruction are the methods used by teachers to teach their students. Instructional techniques are employed by individual teachers in response to the needs of the students in their classes. It's the how. So statutorily, And the references are there. I'm not going to read them to you. They're quite lengthy. But statutorily, at the state level, so from the Department of Education and the State Board of Education, we are tasked with creating and adopting academic standards. And statutorily, the schools and districts then are tasked with implementing the academic standards. And so, in particular, statutory references exist that are specific to curriculum and instruction, and those statutes point directly back to the local school districts and local schools, and they refer to things like curricular materials, right? Textbooks, teaching aids, software, instructional strategies. So as you're looking at the standards, if you have concerns that have come from maybe past curricular resources that were used in the teaching of science at a particular school, those curricular resources are chosen at the local level. They are not chosen at the state level. So although that's really important feedback to give, giving feedback to the standards group isn't going to get you the results that you're looking for. So what we would ask is that if you have feedback that's particularly about curriculum or about instructional techniques that are used in the classroom, that you would direct those back to your school or to that governing board, depending upon who's in charge of the various things. I know sometimes they have curricular decisions made more at local school. Sometimes they're made at the governing board level. So just a little reminder for that, because what we really want is to make sure that when you spend your valuable time giving us feedback, that it's feedback that we can use, and that if you have other feedback to give, that you're directing that to the right people so that action can happen from that feedback. So that's just a little introduction. I'm going to hand it over now to Bree. Bree's going to go more depth about the actual standards themselves, and then Sarah's going to give you some examples of how that might translate into a classroom, and then I'll come back up at the end to wrap us up. Here's your clicker.
Hi, thank you guys for being here today. And let's see if I got this one right. Woohoo, okay. So, as we continue with the standards process, just so you know, we are going to plan support for you. And it's going to look like providing ongoing professional development to educators, provide guidance documents and resources to educators, parents, and the community, assist with any needed revisions to the statewide assessment, collect feedback on new standards and determine areas of need, collaborate with professional organizations and institutes of higher education, and continually communicate with educators, parents, and the community. Excuse me. And as Carol said, standards development is a process. And to begin the process, we start with a vision, and then we decided a critical content at each band. So it's not like we just picked ideas out of thin air and said, that looks good right there. No, we actually used a lot of research, and we have a research base behind the process that we have been going through. If you do not know, the two main documents that we have used in our process is a framework for K-12 education and working with big ideas of science education. And I'm going to go through just a brief overview of what these two documents are. Now, the framework was published in 2012, and it provides an evidence-based foundation for standards by drawing on current scientific research, including research on the way students learn science effectively, and identifies the science all kindergarten through 12th grade students should know to be scientifically literate by the end of 12th grade. The framework was made for educators and for educational leaders to use in the development of standards. We have used this document for our standards, and other states have also used this document for standards. Now, Working with Big Ideas of Science Education was published in 2015. It was written in response to concerns that many students did not find science in schools interesting or see it relevant to their lives. Part of the problem was an overcrowded curriculum that appeared to be a set of disconnected facts to be learned. This document acknowledges that science should be learned as a progression towards understanding the key ideas that connect to students' lives during and then beyond their school years. These are identified as the 14 big ideas in science that should be understood by all students, not only those who go on to study science after high school, and all students should learn them regardless of gender, their cultural background, or any disabilities. Both of these documents create a coherent learning progression from kindergarten through 12th grade, and both of these documents are free online resources. You don't have to go out and buy them. Here we have broken down the big ideas. I'm going to go over the first big ideas, or the first 10 big ideas, and they are about knowing science. And to be able to effectively use science, students must know science. Content knowledge goes hand in hand with effective exploration of scientific ideas and theories. In the draft standards, we have color-coded sections to highlight the 3 main disciplines of study. The 4 orange big ideas of knowing science represent the physical science like chemistry or physics. The 2 blue ideas represent earth and space science, and the 4 green ideas distinguish the life sciences. These big ideas of knowing science were based on the research about what students need to know about science to become scientifically literate members of society. The last four big ideas are known as using science. And this is the process of actively doing science. So finding causes for phenomenon, developing explanations using available evidence, using knowledge to create, and understanding how science impacts the world around us. With that in mind, each standard of the draft standards asks students to use science in some way. Now switching to the framework for K-12 science education. The framework lays out the 3 dimensions of science learning. All 3 dimensions are intended to be taught together and not in isolation from one another. And the standards were written with this thinking in mind. The three-dimensional learning shifts the focus of science classroom environments where students use the disciplinary core ideas with the cross-cutting concepts and the science and engineering practices to explore, examine, and explain how and why phenomena occur, and to design solutions to problems. For example, second graders in physical science and in the draft standard 2.P1 U2.1 asks students to plan and carry out an investigation to determine that matter has mass, takes up space, and is recognized by its observable properties. Students will use the collected evidence to develop and support an explanation. The disciplinary core idea of this standard is within the physical sciences. The 2 science and engineering practices ask students to plan and carry out an investigation and use that data to develop and support an explanation. Students will use the knowledge they have learned about matter from other grade levels and disciplines, which is a cross-cutting concept, to deepen their understanding and make connections to their prior knowledge. So all 3 dimensions of learning are seen in the standard. The disciplinary core ideas have the power to focus K-12 science curriculum, instruction, and assessment on the most important aspects of science. This is listed as the 3rd dimension in the framework. To be considered a core idea, the idea should have broad importance across multiple sciences or engineering disciplines, or be a key organizing concept of a single discipline. Provide a key tool for understanding or investigating more complex ideas and solving problems. Relate to the interests of life experiences to students, or be connected to societal or personal concerns that require scientific or technological knowledge. Be teachable and learnable over multiple grades at increasing levels of depth and sophistication. Core ideas are categorized into 3 disciplines of study: the physical science, earth and space sciences, and life sciences. On the image, you can see that some of the major concepts and key players that make up the core ideas in the physical science, of course, are transfer and energy, and these words are repeated throughout the draft standard. I'd like to take you through a progression of one of the core ideas of knowing science in the physical science from kindergarten through 12th grade. In this example, the core idea of knowing science is the big idea physical science 3. Changing the movement of an object requires a net force to be acting on it. In 1st grade, the standard asks students to plan and carry out investigations which demonstrate how equal forces can be balanced forces can balance objects and how unequal forces can push, pull, or twist objects, making them change their speed, direction, or shape. Then in the 5th grade, students obtain, analyze, and communicate evidence of the effects that balanced and unbalanced forces have on the motion of objects. In the 6th grade, students plan and carry out an investigation that can support the evidence-based explanation of how objects on Earth are affected by gravitational forces. In the 7th grade, students use non-algebraic mathematics and computational thinking to explain Newton's laws of motion. And in high school, students develop a mathematical model using Newton's laws to predict the change in motion of an object or system in one dimension. So as you see, rigor is seen throughout the entire progression, even in 1st grade. The ideas students form of force and motion become more sophisticated as they move up grade levels. In Earth and space, we could see that, of course, the word Earth is really large. Energy and the sun, they're all very important concepts throughout the draft standards. And looking at a progression for Earth and space science, the example, big idea, Earth and space science 2, is that the Earth and our solar system are a very small part of one of many galaxies within the universe. In 2nd grade, students analyze and interpret data to explain the Earth's position in relation to the sun at different times during a 24-hour period and changes the apparent shape of the moon from one night to another. In 5th grade, students develop and use models based on evidence to construct explanations about the movement of the Earth and moon within our solar system. And in 6th grade, students develop and use models to construct an explanation of how eclipses, moon phases, and tides occur within the sun, Earth, moon system, moving on from outer space to see how objects affect us on Earth. And in high school, students apply mathematical or computational representations of Kepler's law as they relate to the movement of planets and objects in the solar system, now having a deeper understanding of Earth, our solar system, and how we are part of many galaxies in the universe. In life science, we can see that organisms like plants and animals are important. Energy, again, is a common theme throughout. The environment, all are important to understanding of biology. The core idea exampled for biology is Big Ideas Life Science 1. Organisms are organized on a cellular basis and have a finite lifespan. In kindergarten, students ask questions about and explain how specialized structures found on a variety of plants and animals, including humans, help them sense and respond to their environment. In 3rd grade, students develop and use models to explain that plants and animals have internal and external structures that serve various functions that aid in growth, survival, behavior, and reproduction. In 6th grade, students develop and use a model to explain the organizational levels of structures in multicellular organisms, consisting of organ systems, organs, tissues, and cells, beginning to look deeper at the micro level of organization. And in high school, students generate questions and/or predictions based on observations and evidence to explain cellular organization, structure, and function, leading to begin to be able to find answers to those questions and fully understand what makes something alive and the structures that support life. So those were the disciplinary core ideas. Moving on to cross-cutting concepts, which is the 2nd dimension in the framework. These concepts cross boundaries between science disciplines and provide an organized way to connect knowledge from various disciplines into a coherent and scientifically based view of the world. Their purpose is to provide a lens to help students deepen their understanding of the core ideas and make sense of the natural, and to make sense of phenomena in the natural and designed worlds. Lastly, we have the science and engineering practices, which is the 1st dimension listed in the framework. Now, in the past, a rigid model of a single scientific method that does not accurately reflect the complex thinking or work of scientists or engineers has usually been used in the classroom. Now, the framework calls for an engaging way for students to use science in the classroom so that they conduct investigations, formulate explanations, or design solutions. A lot of times, especially as we move up grade levels, students feel science is boring and irrelevant. We want to keep the joy of science education throughout their K-12 science career. We also want our students to have the confidence to seek out higher earning STEM careers and not think that science and STEM careers are too hard or unattainable for them as future life goals. In the classroom, practices act as a set of building blocks. Just as you use different blocks to build different structures, you use different practices for different purposes. The draft science standards are designed to assist students in developing their ability to effectively use the practices as they develop their own investigations, build their own models and explanations. You will see these explicitly in the draft of the standards, making them action statements for students to be doing science. Here is a comparison of the scientific method to the science and engineering practices. We can still find the scientific method within the science and engineering practices, but it's no longer a linear step that students have to do to be able to be considered doing a science lab. The scientific and engineering practices take on a more realistic approach to scientific study and how a scientist would approach a scientific phenomena or design a solution to a problem in the real world. The classic scientific method steps kind of fit into this. This is just one example of how they can be put into the chart. Now, it can change based on what the student is doing in a science classroom or what problem they want to solve or what it is that they are doing. But this is just one example of how they could fit into a chart. All right, now we're going to talk about the document itself. Let's look at the coding. So when you're looking at the document and you need to be able to read the code, it's a little bit on the long side, so we're going to break it down. The first item on the code determines the grade level that code is associated with. So looking at the one on the left, the K stands for kindergarten. The second portion of the code, L1U2, in kindergarten shows the intersection of knowing science and using science. In this case, L1 stands for knowing science in life. Organisms are organized on a cellular basis and have a finite lifespan. And U2 stands for using science. Scientific explanations, theories, and models are those that best fit the evidence we have at a particular time. And lastly, the number of the strand for that grade level is listed after the intersection. So for kindergarten, the number 6 stands for the 6th standard in the kindergarten document. It does not imply an order for the standards to be taught. It does not imply the order of importance of that standard. High school is a little bit different. All 14 big ideas are seen throughout high school, and it is up to the district or the charter school to determine how they best are incorporated into a high school course or a sequence of courses to meet graduation requirements. The essential high school standards follow the same pattern for coding as the kindergarten through 8th grade. The first item of the code, the HS, stands for high school. Because the district or charter has the ability to determine the course sequence, there is no grade level like 9th or 10th attached to the high school standards. The essential standards are standards that are intended for all students to learn in high school. The high school plus standards, the coding is similar to the high school essential standards with the addition of a plus symbol followed by the subject, either physics, chemistry, earth and space, or life that they belong to. Looking closer at these two categories, the essential standards are to be learned by all students across 3 credits of high school science, includes all 14 big ideas to prepare students for adult science literacy, and may be assessed on the state science assessment. The high school plus standards are designed to extend the learning of the core standards. They are specific to physics, chemistry, earth and space, and biology courses to prepare students for college level courses, and may be assessed by districts but not by the state. Okay, so this is how the standards look on paper. I would like to turn the floor over to Sarah Sleesman, our ADE STEM specialist, who's going to give you a look at what the standards look like in the classroom and to the children.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So I'm going to go a little bit more into these 3 dimensions that Bree was talking about. So now that we have a good understanding of a little bit more of those 3 dimensions of teaching and learning, we're going to review the 3 dimensions by looking at not only the progressions, but what it would look like at instructional level for one of these standards with a 4th grade example, a 2nd grade example, as well as high school. When they're layered together, the 3 dimensions provide that solid foundation for our students' learning of science. But also we want to be building those essential skills in the investigations, reviewing and bringing in arguments and evidence, and using engineering practices for designing solutions. We appreciate that slide, and I'll explain that, is that there's not one right way to have it. There's different ways that it can be moved with different parts. So we don't ever want to see it as one is connected with the other. So they're always moving and are functioning depending on what you're doing. So the overarching descriptor here for this standards tells us that students must understand the basic forms of energy using Earth's resources, and that energy is transformed, along with understanding electricity and magnetism. The first standard asks students to develop and use models to demonstrate how a system transfers energy from one object to another when the objects are not touching. The second standard is demonstrating currents with electricity and magnetism, and the third standard is using renewable and non-renewable energies. The standard we're going to focus here is the first standard. Today, and we can look at this through a variety of key concepts. So you will see the key concepts there on the right-hand side. Those are examples. We could also use other key concepts. For example, flames from a fire create heat and light energy. Or we may talk about a cool car, and when you come back to that car, it has drastically changed due to the solar rays from the sun. Another example could be a solar clothes dryer. When you leave and you come back, your clothes are now dry. It could be wind turbines or grilling food. There could be many key concepts here that we could pull in. In this example today for 4th grade, I'm going to talk more about solar energy and how students will need to develop a system to measure the height using a solar fountain. So here we're going to have the knowing and the using of science. We have our knowing science, which will be demonstrating that transfer of energy, and we have the using science, which will be developing and using a model. When we talk about models here, there's many different models the students could develop and use for this. They could build diagrams or draw diagrams. They could build drawings. They could represent using drawings. They could have a physical replica. They could use mathematical representations. They could make and create analogies. They could do computer simulations. There are a wide variety of models to support the learning we want our students to be using. For today, students use the models to show how the energy is transferred from the sun from a solar panel to make the fountain function. Once the model has been designed and constructed, students use this model to test different angles and to keep a record of it in a diagram. They are using this practice of building a model to investigate and understand those key core concepts we want them to be learning, those key features and functions. Here we have that radiation is the form of the photon rays that excite those electrons in a panel, causing them to move. Once those electrons are moving and there's a path is provided, then the electrons can work for us. In this case, energy from radiation is operating the pump, allowing the fountain to operate. So the phenomena that we would ask our students to explain is what generated energy to make the model work, or what variables affected the production. This also allows itself to create relevancy for other standards within circuits. That was another standard we could have pulled in. We also have working with the renewable and non-renewable energies here that we could pull in. So we also want to think about that relevancy. As Bree explained, the cross-cutting concepts helped us to link the different disciplines. Looking at the explanation here of energy and matter. Energy and matter is the flow of the cycles and conservation. Tracking fluxes of energy and matter into, out of, and within systems helps us to understand the system's possibilities and limitations. Students could then use the model, text, and diagrams to explain the phenomena of solar energy. The solar cells are like that of a larger one. It absorbs the photons from the sun to excite those electrons and generate that electricity. The sun is not physically touching it, but the rays allow the fountain to work. This is energy. So today we are looking at energy in the physical science. When we're looking at this across other disciplines, energy and matter could come up in food chains, in solar energy, in gravitational energy, stored energy. As energy creates movement, it creates growth, light, sound, warmth. Energy can be seen across multiple different cross-cutting concepts. So putting it all together, as a fourth grader, what do they know about science? Can we see that through all the three dimensions that these are pulled together where they're learning about energy? Looking at a second grade example, Earth and Space Sciences in second grade analyze patterns. So I'm going to look first at the standard in the orange. So analyze patterns in weather conditions of various regions of the world and design, test, and refine solutions to protect humans from severe weather conditions. So here, the science and engineering practice is to really constructing that explanations and designing solutions. In this standard, they're analyzing patterns to design, to test, and refine solution. That is the job of an engineer, someone who defines problems and designs solutions. Here it is based on weather patterns to protect humans in severe weather. So if we dive into the cross-cutting concept of structure and function, of what the engineer would think about is, well, what type of gloves, shoes, hats, eye protections, like sunglasses in this case, in different severe weather conditions for different areas. Depending on what that cross-cutting concept is you're focusing on, it could connect to different disciplines as well. For instance, social studies could be a topic where you could make a connection, or a story that's read that's fictional or even nonfiction text. So the teacher here has that discretion to integrate with other disciplines like social studies, math, or reading and language arts. So these cross-cutting concepts really pull in other subject matter and integrate together, bringing in things not taught in silos, but really pulling things together as a whole. So in the high school example, we're looking at here, what I think of to look at this one instead of going through each one, but to keep in mind this is one standard in life science. There's many other standards that the students are used to ask and to know these big ideas. So your job possibly is when you're looking at the surveys is to go in and see, okay, here's the big ideas. Now, are these standards covering those big ideas? And if they are, fantastic. If they're not, that's where we need that feedback to know how can we particularly change these to make them better. So that's what I have now, and I am going to hand it back over to Carol.
Okay, so several large changes have happened from the 2004 standards to this current draft, right? So we had before performance objectives. Now we're switching to broader standards. Some of the learning behind why we want to do that is, one, it makes it more relevant for kids, as Sarah was talking about. But what we know is that kids learn best sort of down there at the bottom of the triangle, right? So by group discussions, by doing, by teaching others. So if we can write standards that allow teachers to actually get to that portion of the triangle, what we know is that we're going to have students who will better recall information long into their lives versus simply staying up there at the lecture reading audiovisual. Of course, we're going to be in that part of the triangle at certain times, but we always want to try to push to get to a little bit broader than just memorizing facts, but getting to that application of the facts and really using and doing science. We're, as you heard in detail, we're organizing the standards around big ideas, and the thought process behind that is what it does is it helps us to develop a really clear progression from all the way from kindergarten all the way through whatever is the final course that a student may take in science, and it helps with coherence amongst the standards and between the grades. And then finally, we are trying to connect science practices, so the doing of science, with the content of science to better represent how science is practiced in the real world. Because what we'd like to do is to help students to develop the skills, the attitudes, the perseverance to be able to say, hey, there's a problem there. I want to investigate that problem, and I'm going to follow it the whole way through till I come up with a solution that makes sense for that problem. And that takes a lot of teachers in the classroom taking the time to build the basic skills for them to be able to do that, so that when they're ready to exit high school, they're prepared for wherever and whatever they might choose to do in their future. So timeline, and I just want to reiterate at the top, it says tentative implementation timeline. Everything's always tentative because who knows how much feedback we're going to get, who knows how much information the tech reviewers are going to send back to us. So it could take us longer to readjust the draft to make sure that we're taking care of all the comment that we get. But the goal would be to have this back to the State Board of Education for something that they could adopt in fall. And then after they adopt, then we'll go through all of those implementation things that Bree talked about right at the beginning of her presentation. So again, remember, one of what we're asking you to do, and I can't even tell you, I'm so excited. There's people here. We had like 11 yesterday, and we have more today. Go Science! Yes, I'm so happy you're all here. You don't know how happy I am. You're all here. It's so great. So just as a reminder that the feedback that we get needs to be actionable and specific. So we pulled from the current public survey, which is up online, and you can see everybody's responses. It's right there for you. We pulled some examples of actionable versus non-actionable that might just help you a little bit as you're thinking about what your comments can be. So one was space science should remain in 7th or 8th grade. Okay, we can work with that. That's specific. It tells us where people think space science should be. Could it have a little more detail? Maybe, but it's at least something we can definitely work with. The abstract concepts in 6th grade life science need a foundation, which isn't there. Okay, that gives us really something specific to look at. We can take a look and say, okay, what do they see that's missing foundationally? Can't be curriculum, instruction, or too vague. So providing resources, materials, and key vocabulary terms. I don't know if that's a good thing, if that's a bad thing, if it's relating to one specific grade level, all the grade levels. So a little more detail on that one would be really helpful, because remember, when the groups come back together again, they're going to see individual comments. They're not necessarily going to see all your comments linked together that you put in. So make sure that people can read them as an individual comment with enough detail. Structure and functions of living organisms. I don't know what that means, and so I wouldn't know how to act on that. So it's really thinking about it from the perspective of somebody sitting in a room who's not in your head, but they need to interpret what you wanted to have happen. So more detail when you're providing that comment is really very helpful to the working groups as they go back and begin to take action on those comments. So just a couple little examples. We're going to take just a short break. We had originally planned 10 minutes, but there's more of you here than there were yesterday, so do you think we can do it in 5? Okay. So we'll do a 5-minute break. The reason for the break, just that the facilities for the restroom, if you need to use them, if you go out this door, turn right, they're on your left. Or if you want to get some water or something, there's vending machines there. They take credit or debit, or there's free water with a cup too if you'd like to do that. So we'll come back together again in 5 minutes, which would be about 4:15. Oh, okay. And during that time, I forgot, you have a job to do. My apologies. You received a comment form when you came in. If you could fill that form out and give it to us, it will help us as we're calling you up. We'll give you your form back to read from, but we would like to give everybody the opportunity to enter their comments into the record using the microphone. So if you could fill that out and provide it to one of the ADE staff, that would be really helpful. Thank you. Okay, I know some of you are still filling out your comment form. That's fine. As you get them done, just bring them on up here to us. What I will do is I'll call you up. You can read your comments into the record. Oh, look, there's even an empty. And what I forgot to tell you, too, because I didn't write it down, so therefore I forgot to tell you, is if you wanted to see the framework document or the big ideas document, if you had not seen those, we did bring some extra copies if you wanted to just take a flip through them. They are available online if you want to look at them later, but if you also wanted to look at them. So I will call you up, and we're going to, fortunately, fortunately, there's more of you here today. Unfortunately, that means you're going to have maybe a little less time. So we're going to set the timer for about 2.5 minutes. So when you hear the beep, 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 it's a very kind beep that they have over here. Just finish up your comments if you could. That would be really appreciated. But we do want to give everybody a chance to come up who would like to come up. And then if we have any extra time, if you have anything additional to say, we certainly would open the mic back up again. So, Joelle, I've got you on top. Joelle.
I get to go first.
Yeah.
Set the bar. Set the bar. Thanks, Barb.
Set the bar high.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Joelle Clark. I work at the Center for Science Teaching and Learning at Northern Arizona University. I'm from Coconino County. And I have just a couple of questions, and they're not necessarily meant to be responded to now, but there are some things that I was thinking about as I was reviewing the standards. And I just was kind of curious about some of the scientific vetting processes. Like it's interesting that you brought up the energy example, for example, but I think there's some terminology and some other kinds of things that could be reflected to be a little bit more scientifically accurate. So I'm just kind of wondering what that process is for the vetting of the accuracy of the science within the science standards. So that's one question, excuse me. I do have several. And then the second one that I just jotted down on my paper today was that the Earth and space science seemed to be, small, comparatively speaking. And I understand that from the public commenting process that one of the things I believe you said was that if the standards do not seem to adequately address the big concepts, that there may be some room to grow that. And so I'm just, again, wondering how much latitude there may be in suggesting some of the specific changes, Carol, that you mentioned, that in adding to or maybe fleshing out some of the content there for the Earth and Space Science. So those were two just right now.
Good. Yes, and we do engage with technical reviewers who are higher education in the specific areas, so we should get some of that feedback. But if you are noticing any of those issues, please provide us with that as specific feedback so that we can act upon it. And absolutely, that's the whole purpose of this public comment period and why we made it a 60-day public comment period, which is really quite lengthy, is so that if people are noticing that things are missing, that we're not going deep enough, they can provide us with that specific feedback, and they have time to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to keep it open. Barb Reinert. Do you need your notes?
Barb Reinert. I have lots of different roles, but I actually came today because I have 9 grandchildren in the state of Arizona education system, and have a very vested interest in science. So first of all, I want to applaud the ADE for the documents and the research they use. The framework, absolutely wonderful, and the 14 big ideas. And I love the introduction. You have really captured what the 3-dimensional instructional practices should be in classrooms. However, my concern comes when I see the list of key concepts, which technically really a lot of them aren't key concepts. There are a lot of vocabulary in there. It creates the minutia that we had in 2004 with the POs. And I know with teachers, it becomes a checklist. And so if we really want to capture where the research and evidence came from for moving in the right direction, yay for Arizona, by using the 3-dimensional instructional practices, I think we really, really need to have those key concepts left up to districts, or at the very least move them into a supporting document, but not in the actual standards. Thank you.
Thank you. Bailey Hirschberger.
Hello, I'm Bailey Hirschberger. I'm a teacher in the Phoenix Union High School District. So first, I wanted to say I'm really excited about the science and engineering practices, kind of taking over the scientific method. I think that'll be really fun and great for our students. How we're going to change that whole mindset is another story, so hopefully we have training and things available for that. But what I'm here to discuss about is more so from the life science essential standards. So on page 63, under the ecosystem standards, HS L2U418, the standard reads, the students will obtain, evaluate, and communicate information about the positive and negative ethical, social, economic, and political implications of human activity on the biodiversity of an ecosystem. Formerly, you could also find this under the Earth and Space Science Standard, HSE1U414. But formerly, these standards kind of included the negative impacts of fossil fuels and its relation to the human footprint. But it looks like we're attempting to remove that verbiage from the standard, and I just wanted to kind of challenge you to keep it in, considering that fossil fuels are a multi-billion, if not trillion-dollar business. It would directly relate to the standard's need to integrate economic implications of human impact, and considering the number of people, communities, and countries who are affected by fossil fuel industry, it would seem that there's no doubt social and ethical issues surrounding this business, and considering fossil fuel companies contribute billions of dollars annually to political parties and agendas nationally, state, and worldwide, this business is inherently political. And in fact, it seems that fossil fuels and their impact directly relate to that standard. And so, believe what you want about fossil fuels, but I feel that it's important to leave it in the standard and allow our students to develop their own opinion of it, and kind of letting them learn about it in new, innovating ways to, create energy for our future, I think is important. And, it's been in the standards all of these years, and it hasn't had any detrimental effect on its business or influence. So I feel we should leave it in. And to quote one of my high school students in environmental science, I asked them if they thought we should leave fossil fuels in, and they said that it's really important for them, they feel, to learn about fossil fuels, especially in Phoenix, because we have such high pollution already, that kids need to know why our city's air is so dirty and why our kids are getting asthma, and then that they can develop ways to prevent it. So hopefully we'll leave those in. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we keep your document? Or?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Awesome. Thank you. Ed Wrights, please. Do you need your original document, Mr. Wrights?
My name is Ed Wrights, and what does a 92-year-old man care about education?
A lot.
Well, I have 10 great-grandchildren and 2 on the way, and I am concerned what the future generations will be receiving. I looked at all of the 83 pages of the standards, and I found something that, as I thought, might be troubling. It's repeated for the 6th and the 8th grade, and it's repeated for high school. The theory of evolution seeks to make clear the unity and diversity of living and extinct organisms. Over countless generations, changes resulting from natural diversity within a species are believed to lead to the selection of those individuals best suited to survive under certain conditions. Species not able to respond sufficiently to changes in their environment become extinct. The teaching of evolution is something that concerns me because it's a theory and it's not science. I wrote a book recently and devoted an entire chapter to this subject. I will read just a short part of it. over 70 years now, we have been teaching our youth that we came from pre-existing vertebrates, and God, the Creator, is not allowed to be taught in most of our public schools. The result is what we are now observing in colleges and universities throughout the land. Let's discuss the idea of our coming from pre-existing vertebrates. In the first place, it is illogical. We used to have in our colleges course on logic. Logic tells us that everything exists, has a maker. Someone designed it. Someone made it. When we observe all things we call nature, our natural instincts tell us that there was design and planning somewhere. Some of the evolutionists followed this same line of thinking and came up with what they called intelligent design, or ID. They were not going so far as to call it God, but their counterpart sharply refuted the concept. Not only is it illogical, it is impossible. All forms of life as we know them have a seed within themselves so that they reproduce their own kind. Of course, it comes back to the simple biblical phrase in describing creation, whose seed was in itself. There is no evidence that any living thing reproduces itself into something foreign to its inherent existence. This has been true as we know it for thousands of years. 5,000 years ago, Papa camels got together with Mama camels, and the result was a baby camel. That's the only way we know that one organism produces. They produce themselves. By simply going back to the writings of Charles Darwin, in The Origin of Species and the Descent of Man, you discover that the theory of evolution was not science. It was just a theory, a man who could not come to conclusions, because there are none. But if you read what he wrote in the 6th chapter, you understand the biggest problem he had with his theory. He pointed out 4 difficulties he had with his own theory. I'll just go over the first one.
Mr. Reitz, if I could have you finish up the timer. Thank you.
Why, if species descended from other species of fine gradations, do we not everywhere see innumerable transitional forms? That was his first question. Why is not all nature in confusion instead of species being as we see them, well defined? That problem has never been solved, even though we've been studying it for 158 years. Neither are any of the other problems that he mentioned in Chapter 6 of his Origin of Species. And finally, in the next chapter has to do with other objections that others had with it. And finally, in the last chapter, he even uses the phrase creator, perhaps the creator, something. And the way we have been teaching it for the last 70 years is we are teaching it as though that is where man came from. In the beginning, we came from our Creator. Just one last comment, and that is, if we would teach creation science and teach evolution as a mere theory, which it is not science, we would not need to use the voucher system so much. Betsy DeVos is a Christian lady, and she favors much of the use of vouchers, and some people are upset with her because of that. But that's the Christian point of view. We want creation taught in schools, and God brought back in.
Thank you. Okay, Jennifer Reynolds, thank you. Do you need your document back, Jennifer? Okay.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Reynolds. For those who don't know me, I'm from Mommy Lobby AZ, and I'm also the creator of Arizona's Against Common Core. I have a very big problem with the way the standards are written, especially with the frequent use of modeling. I have experience firsthand. I have 4 children, one who's graduated and one who's a senior right now. And they were told in their science class in chemistry, I want you to throw out everything you thought you knew about science, and we are learning science in a new way with modeling. We are throwing out the scientific method as well. This is exactly what we were doing with these standards. Before my children had a basic knowledge of chemistry, they were asked the whys of science before even knowing the basic knowledge or the whats of science. This is what modeling does. It doesn't steer children towards science, technology, engineering, or math. It drives them away from STEM in droves due to frustrations not being taught basic concepts of science first and then learning to apply those through labs in chemistry, biology experiments, and physics. I have a PhD friend who's an Arizona teacher. He has taught science in elementary, middle school, and high school. And his family has done the CO2 research at Biosphere 2 and at ASU, proving the benefits of CO2 in the Earth's atmosphere. And matter of fact, I'm an environmental engineer, and I don't believe in global warming for those in the room who do. It's been debunked over and over and over again. And my husband's also an engineer. He's an electrical engineer and a computer science major, so STEM is extremely important to us. He had this to say, this scientist, PhD, modeling is only valuable if fundamentals are taught and learned first. Otherwise, students are engaging in activities without any schema in their heads to link new knowledge to. I hated the modeling training I received. I'd walk into a room with a bunch of supplies on the table, and the instructor asks us to design an experiment to compare velocity and acceleration. Ridiculous. Modeling is too assumptive and lacks fundamental building blocks for understanding key concepts in science. So I would implore you to please look into modeling. It's horrific, and it shouldn't be taught. There's two other experts. If I have time, I just wanted to read a quick quote. Zev Wermund and Paul Gross, they reviewed the Next Gen Science Standards, which were rated a C, by the way, with the Fordham Institute. A lot of those same terms are used in our Arizona standards, and they said this about modeling. The new standards leave out much important science that has worked perfectly for our students in recent past. To follow the newest wrinkle in school pedagogy, every standard becomes a performance test, not necessarily on the history, the facts, and big ideas of science, but primarily on the student's ability to satisfy someone else's idea of their explanation or modeling or collecting evidence skills and the like. So I urge you to please consider the comments that I already sent them to Carol Lippert. I'm working on a big draft on problems I see in the standards with modeling. It's detrimental using modeling in school, especially in the high school grades, if they don't have the background, the key concepts first, because you're asking them the why questions before they know the what, and all it is doing is frustrating kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Tori Roberg. Do you need this back? Okay.
Thank you. This is my first time.
Welcome. We're glad to have you.
Hi, I'm Tori Roberg. I'm here in the double role. I'm a mom to two kids in the Washington Elementary School District, 2nd and 6th grade. I'm also here on behalf of the Secular Coalition for Arizona. We support teaching accurate science standards in our public schools. We understand that the ASC core idea of evolution was not accurately represented in the standards. And I have the information, and I apologize, I just got this yesterday. This is just really fun to be here doing something new. I'm normally at the legislature. So the proposed idea for evolution is actually watered down quite a bit, and we would like to see it restored to the ASC standard that was in the Working with Big Ideas of Science Education. And that standard states that the diversity of organisms, living and extinct, is the result of evolution. All life today is directly descended from a universal common ancestor that was a simple one-celled organism. Over countless generations, changes resulting from natural diversity within a species lead to the selection of those individuals best suited to survive under certain conditions. Species not able to respond sufficiently to changes in their environment become extinct. And we'd like to see it restored to that. In addition, there's also some passages that have also been, they seem to be deliberately weakened throughout, and I can send you more information about that. But this has really been fun to hear all of the work you're doing on science. I just wanted to add that last February, on February 12th, which is Darwin Day, we celebrated Charles Darwin and the theory of evolution by bringing Dr. Randolph Nesse to the Arizona State Capitol. He is an esteemed evolutionary medicine. He is the founder of evolutionary medicine in the entire United States. and he works at ASU. He's right here in our home. And if it weren't for learning about evolution, we wouldn't know how different biologies, different things are mutating and changing every day. And so he's using that information to improve medicine for people, to improve procedures. I was very impressed with his work, and I do fully support having a strong science curriculum in our schools.
Okay,
thank you.
Tiffany Smith.
Hi, my name is Tiffany Smith. I'm a teacher in the West Valley School District. I'm simply talking about the formatting of the document on there. So I am a chemistry high school teacher, and I noticed that in the high school plus standards, it seems very disjointed from the essential standards. And so I don't really know exactly how to fix that other than potentially to do like an objective and a sub-objective. To me, it seems very hard to read at this stage. And the only other topic that we were talking about was potentially you have your core ideas and your doing, so your knowing and your doing in the very front page. If there's any potential of getting that implemented at more sections in the standard, so it's really easy to refer back to because it is a little bit disjointed at this point. But I appreciate all your work.
Great, thank you. Erin Killeen.
My name's Aaron Killeen. I also am out west in Dysart District as a 21st century specialist. Tiffany actually earlier mentioned some of my similar thought processes on the fact that the knowing and doing components of the standards being at the very front of the document. We're kind of concerned that many of our teachers might not flip back to that on a regular basis as opposed to being right there with the standard. And the other thing that really kind of jumped out at me is earlier there was a presentation that had a visual that was the knowing and using standard, the big idea of that, and then the specific standard, the science and engineering concepts. That kind of documentation would be nice as supporting document, I guess, for every standard would be really nice to be able to see that, and maybe even adding a component down beneath that where it illustrates not just the standard, but where it either the standard leads to or where the standard came from, so like previous or later grades on there would be really great to have.
Great. Thank you. Jennifer Nielsen. Thank you. You've got a cheering section back there.
She's like, I didn't put anything down, telling us. I'm Jennifer Nielsen. I teach in the Fowler District in Maricopa County, 6th grade. Some of the discussions I have with my middle school group during our PLC time is just about some of the standards being moved around. We are a little bit concerned about the way that 6th grade and 7th grade have been kind of flip-flopped. So we look at Earth on its own in 6th grade right now, and then 7th grade teachers build out into the universe from that Earth. And so they're seeing a little bit of a disconnect of how we're going to teach about the universe and then go back to the Earth. So looking at that a little bit, and then some of the standards were broken apart a little bit. From 7th grade up to 8th grade, they talk about the rock cycle and the rocks, but then they don't talk about the actual layers until they get to 8th grade. So there's a little concern for that because the 7th grade teachers use a lot of that to teach it in depth so that they can do the lab activities and what's happening and how they look at the different types of rocks and things. So we're just a little, I guess we're on the edge of our seats on how is it really going to work all together if it stays in this format. Okay. Oh, one other thing. I used to teach elementary school. Now I teach middle school. Oh. One of the other people mentioned something about the key concepts. I know that in elementary school it's really difficult when a lot of the schools have so much focus on math and reading to find time for science. So I really like the modeling and activities that they're going to be doing because that's a great way for them to get their hands on and get excited about science before they come up to 6th grade. But we do a lot of, in middle school, there's a lot of back teaching because there's so many concepts that we're supposed to be taught in elementary school that the teachers just don't always get a chance to teach by the time they come up to us. So I'm a little bit concerned about not having some of those key concepts listed so that we know, like, where do we have to go back and teach? Because I can talk to the kids now and say, okay, in 4th grade, how many of you built an electromagnet? And they'll, oh, this half of the class did and this half didn't. So it's nice to have those key concepts for us to look at in that way when we're in some of the upper grades. All right, thank you.
Thank you. There's a few people who haven't spoken. Would you like the opportunity? I don't want to move on, but that was the last paper that I had. No? All right. Oops, my presentation's gone. Oh, there it is. For the last slide. Oh, I have to do it. Oh. Excuse me a moment. I guess I could have just done it from memory, but it's nice for you all to have it to go, whoa, what happened? This is like speed viewing. It's a review. What the heck is going on? I'm trying to go too fast. Sure. Okay, next steps. So first of all, if you go home and, tonight as you're perusing the standards and tomorrow as you're looking at them again and Sunday and Monday, I don't know, it's what I do, but, if other things come to mind that you did not talk about today, or you're like, gosh, I just reread that and it really doesn't make sense, or, whatever, know that the public survey is open until the end of May 28th. So you have lots and lots of time to go in there and leave your comments. You are more than welcome to go in more than one time. That's okay. So if you already went in and you left comments about 3rd grade and then you realized, oh my goodness, I've got things about 4th grade, please go back in and do that. We encourage you to do that. We want you to do that, and we need your feedback. It's very, very important in the work that we're doing. So it is, if you go to the front page of the website, azed.gov, it's right there front and center at the front page. Just click that link and it takes you right to the surveys. I know that's really long, so you don't have to do that. It's right on the front page of the website if you want to leave comments that way. This meeting today was recorded, so thank you for playing along on the microphone game and coming up to the microphone. That would be really helpful. And it will be available for people to view. And I think, how many social studies people? 60-some? 65 views. So science, you can do better than that. Come on, get people to view it. We will be reconvening the working groups to both look at the technical feedback that's coming in from our technical reviewers. And if you're curious who the technical reviewers are, those are also their names, their bios. Everything's on the website. Just go. Everything should be there. If you don't see something that you wish was there, just holler at me and we'll get it put up there for you. Nothing secret. And then when those working groups, we are, of course, always collecting applications for those working groups. So if you are here today and you haven't been involved in a working group in the past, but you're interested in doing that, please go in and tell us a little bit about yourself and submit a form. And we will probably be reaching out to you because it is summertime, after all, where we'll be doing the work. So we know a number of people will actually go take vacations. So we're going to be looking for a group of people to be doing that. And then, of course, we'll be coming back to the State Board of Education for adoption sometime in the fall. What we will do, since you gave us all your email addresses, thank you for doing that today, we will let you know that when the drafts are going to go back to the State Board, so that if you want the opportunity to look at those public documents prior to the State Board meeting, or even to come to the State Board meeting and offer public comment at the State Board meeting, you'll be more than welcome to do that as well. So that being said, again, I just cannot express to you enough how happy I am that you came today. It's Friday and it's late, and traveled from Flagstaff. Yesterday we had somebody from the Navajo Nation down here. So I so appreciate it, because what you do has direct impact on what's happening with our kids in our schools, and that is so important to me to hear from all of you. So again, thank you for being here today, and please travel safely back to wherever it is that you need to travel. And all of us are available by email if you have any questions. Thank you.